By clicking on this video, I know what you're thinking. It was never solved? Really? Naming the video something so bold as just the game's title? Well, let me make a statement. The aim of this video is to answer every single question Five Nights at Freddy's 4 presented to people when it came out. This includes everything, from the main game's plot, down to things like what was intended to be in the box, as well as the meaning of these messages shown on the Scott Games website. But that's later in the video. Let's talk about what we're going to go over now. In order to properly explain everything going on with Five Nights at Freddy's 4, why it was made, what its story is, we need to talk a bit about the space surrounding Five Nights at Freddy's before the game came out. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 came out 11 months after the first game. The entire series developed and made a name for itself extremely quickly, and this is important to take into account. Everything in the first 3 games was extremely fresh in people's minds by this point. So, with that said, I also want to put something else forward as a disclaimer. This video does take into account some things included in future releases in the series, but nothing from them are important to any of my points or conclusions. Future installments are only brought up for the sake of showing how my conclusions also fit together with the current plot of Five Nights at Freddy's. But make no mistake, you do not need to be familiar with any Five Nights at Freddy's games after 4 in order to enjoy this video. This video is everything you need in order to understand Five Nights at Freddy's 4. So, direct your attention to how people felt after Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was released. That game ended in a way that was satisfying, and everybody felt done with the series by that point. There was a happy ending that people worked together toward finding. There was the main antagonist taken out. It brought everything before it together and into one place. That was Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and that's why people loved its ending. But that is a little reductive. While everything I just said is true, there are things which, I think you can make the argument for, were not developed as much as they could have been. Just so everybody's on the same page, let's go over the major plot points of the first 3 games so I can better make that argument to you. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 established a core premise. Haunted animatronics, the reveal is that kids went missing, their dead bodies got hidden in the robots, and now the kids possess them, aiming to kill you and make you one of them. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 established there being multiple locations and multiple sets of murders, with the reveal that the game was a prequel. The oldest location being a place called Fredbear's Family Diner, the next one being the Freddy Fazbear's location where the original murders took place, the third being the one where the second set of murders took place, and the fourth place being the place we play in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 established the concept of springlock suits, robots that can turn into wearable suits, and has the main antagonist of the game be someone who died in one, that person turning out to be the guy who killed the kids in the first place. Now, with that synopsis, let me ask you a question. What do you think, in the first 3 games, would be the most important thing to mention that I just left out? Something maybe a little irrelevant, something special. This is Golden Freddy. 5 kids died in the first set of murders at Freddy Fazbear's, but there are only 4 members of Freddy's gang. Where did the last kid go? Inside here. This limbed costume is where they went. When the first Five Nights at Freddy's game was the only game in the series, there wasn't an easy explanation for what this thing was. There wasn't anything giving us an origin. We were just supposed to accept that the 5th kid appeared to us in the way of a recolored Freddy. What makes it even more of a mystery is that Golden Freddy only appeared very rarely, so most people playing the game had no idea they even existed. And on top of that, they would close the game if you didn't put up your monitor. They worked in a way no other character in the game did. With that, imagine the surprise and satisfaction people got when Five Nights at Freddy's 2 further develops the character, making them a common threat of the game. Again, they work like no other animatronic in the game does, with you having to put on the Freddy head and immediately take it off in order to avoid them. It also gives Golden Freddy their name, the name Golden Freddy being something fans made up initially. Golden Freddy even appears in one of the game's cutscenes, as well as a secret minigame. Minigames become a trend in the series, and Golden Freddy, in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, again appears in one of them. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 has multiple minigames, all with their own titles, but strangely, the one with Golden Freddy is simply titled Stage 01. You should keep that in mind, but well, there's something your eyes already been drawn to. A Golden Bonnie. This is relevant to Five Nights at Freddy's 3 because it shows us where the animatronic we fend off in that game comes from. Something that comes before everything else, hence it being the first stage, pun intended, in the series. That's almost all there is to Golden Freddy and FNaFs 1 through 3, but there's something about them in the first game that I've actually yet to cover. While normally they can only encounter you randomly, if, in the game's bonus custom night mode, you put in the setting 1987, they appear. They jump scare you in the same way that they would have if you encountered them normally. But why is that? What is that? Like the date the guy who made it was born or something? Who am I kidding? You know what the Bite of 87 is. Let's cover it a bit anyway. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 refers to something called the Bite of 87. Within the context of the game, it's pretty much just a one-off joke, but that's not how a lot of people saw it. You see, the Bite of 87 was something deeply captivating to people when FNaF was new. Everybody made fan art of it. There were comics, animations, there was an undeniable electricity to the title. It brought people into the series. And the second game seemingly knew this. It was set in 1987, acknowledging the fact that date is important again, kept it in people's minds. But despite that, FNaF 2 didn't do anything more with it. The idea of it persists. People wanted to know who did the bite. It even persists today as a hot topic, so that's how you know it still matters to people. But then Five Nights at Freddy's 3 comes out, and it doesn't answer it. It doesn't acknowledge it in any way. So this thread gets left hanging. This thing people care about, want to know more about. Golden Freddy is in the same boat. People didn't really feel like they fully got it. Golden Freddy is different from the rest. But how? Enter Five Nights at Freddy's 4, the final chapter. These were the questions people had in mind once Five Nights at Freddy's 3 ended. These were the things that people cared about. There seemingly was room to develop on them. So, a sequel gets made. The final one. Because this is all that's left of the story to tell. But in order to properly take you through the experience of being there when the game came out, I gotta walk you through some things. I want to focus on the game's teasers for a bit, telling you some interesting facts about them. So put yourself in this mindset. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 just released, right? The game sits, and then, on the creator's website, this gets posted. Freddy's hat left out in the spotlight. With how the third game ended, most people think this can mean only one thing. The show's over. And Five Nights at Freddy's ends here. Then, a month goes by. And the hat's gone. A couple days later, the website changes again. It's something new. It's something strange. It's Five Nights at Freddy's final chapter. This monster, it's doing the same pose Withered Freddy did in his teaser, but people don't know what to make of it. Fans are immediately sucked back into the puzzle-solving process, and in trying to find answers, something's found. When downloaded, the image is simply titled 4. So that's it. It's Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Then, more teasers start coming, but there's something different about them. There's this recurring message in them, this question. Was it me? This is the big question marketing the game. What might surprise you, though, is that the answer for what this is leading up to is actually much closer than you'd think. Hidden in the source code of the website are these 8s and 7s just placed there over and over again. 8s and 7s, 87. But there's something I haven't yet talked about with you about these games. I said the name, like, once, but there's a character in this series called Fredbear. He's been mentioned by name as early as FNaF 2. He hasn't been relevant to us yet. That is, until now. Until Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Hidden in this teaser shows a name. The name of a location. Fredbear's Family Diner. A couple more teasers come out, and then the game's trailer. Not even a year after the first game came out, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 drops. People go crazy for it. People scramble to try and understand it. The puzzle is big. Everybody's giving it their all like usual, but some things just don't come together. This game is supposed to be the last in the series. Why does it feel like this game connects to none of the other games? Questions compound. People love the series. They work together to find some sort of answer. This takes the form of a live stream, which has so many community figures in it. The creator posts hints on his website, in accordance with what the community figures are currently talking about in the live stream. These hints, it helps everyone there reach a conclusion. But not everyone is satisfied. Minds are changed. People feel like they never get an answer. Everybody is split. And FNaF 4 ends. In my eyes, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was never solved. I want that to change, and today. I'm going to give you answers that I think are irrefutable. Put things together in a way I think is so comprehensive, it'll feel satisfying. You'll feel content with it. Feel silly for ever thinking otherwise. Let's get this party started. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is split into two sections. It's presented to us in a way that's an inversion of how it was in FNaF 3, with us playing minigames before the night. For the sake of comprehensibility, we're going to go over the two sections individually, and then explain how they relate to each other. The night sections are more basic from a course of events standpoint, so we're going to go over those first. The night gameplay consists of you being a little kid, and fending off monstrous versions of the Freddy Fazbear characters. Despite them being so powerfully large and spiky, a simple wooden door is somehow enough to hold them. A golden version of Freddy acts as the game's final boss, wearing the purple hat and tie we saw in that teaser. He also has unique mechanics from the rest, and is the only threat to fend off in the night where he first shows up. A bonus night also yields something interesting, a more difficult to fend off version of that character, but recolored. This is all we need to go over with the night gameplay. The minigames have a lot to talk about, but they provide a linear narrative. The main character is being abused by his older brother. His birthday is happening in 5 nights, and together, we go through bits of every one of those days with him. He's having his birthday at Fredbear's, even though he hates it there. It's all about him and his brother's relationship, and that abuse culminates with this. It culminates with the bite. Of 87? Nope, but let's get into that more later. Right now, we've got to put some things together. These teasers I showed you earlier, I neglected to mention something about them intentionally. When brightened exponentially, they reveal a word. Nightmare. The fact that these creatures exist at all implies something otherworldly. Then, you take into account the fact that your doors can even stop them. All this put together, you arrive at the conclusion that what we're playing during the night gameplay is this kid's nightmares. We even learn in the game's extras that these versions of the characters are called Nightmare Freddy, Nightmare Bonnie, and so on. That all makes it pretty clear what's going on here, but there's even more that implies a deeper conclusion. Five Nights at Freddy's games have a habit of including hallucinations in the game, little things that occasionally appear which have varying degrees of importance. Some examples of these include the newspaper clippings which told the original game's story, a variety of hidden characters in FNaF 2, and a variety of recolored posters and drawings in FNaF 3. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 continues this trend in a very particular way. Every so often, when you look at the bed, things show up by its side. These things include a pot of flowers, a pill bottle, and an IV drip. What this is implying is that the main character is having these nightmares while in the hospital, following the events of what we see here, with the bite. This is a very clear example of the world outside influencing the nightmares taking place here. But to cap this all off, take into account this. The sound that nightmare animatronics make when jump scaring you is the same noise the older brother makes when he scares us. He can also be heard laughing at us during the first couple minigames, and this sound effect of him laughing is actually the same noise that is edited to make the final boss's laugh sound effects. Everywhere you look, the origin of the nightmares is based around the kid's fear of the older brother. 'Cause, giant robots could probably easily bust these doors down. But you know what couldn't easily bust these doors down? The older brother. Everything is based around that. 7 Ways to Sunday, this game is a nightmare. And I don't mean that as an insult. That's one of the game's core mysteries, that it's a nightmare. That is something overarching, something so important to this game in specific. So let's keep going. Expand your perspective on it. Let's get out of the story for a little. Let's talk about something which is made clear even in the title of this video. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was made to end the series. That's also something so overarchingly important about it, about trying to make sense of all its decisions. The reason why I went over Golden Freddy in the bite is because of this. Those two things were what Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was trying to answer. But immediately, you're going to be thinking about contradictions to that statement. There's questions that come with that statement. So let's get into them now. Golden Freddy is Fredbear. This is something that I think has been true since the first time he was mentioned in FNaF 2. Conceptually, you have to think about what would be the reason for having a recolored version of Freddy Fazbear in the first place. Doesn't it make sense, even as far back as the first game, to imagine that he was some sort of predecessor, giving an actual reason for why Golden Freddy exists? The suit, what it is. Fredbear's Family Diner was described in FNaF 2 to be closed for years. In my previous video on FNaF, I went over how the killer is actually the night guard who worked at the FNaF 2 building before you, and the relevance of that here is how Fredbear and the killer are brought up in the same breath. They're the biggest bits of story given to us in that phone call. This is further cemented in the 6th night to that game, where the phone calls talk about someone using a yellow suit. Back then, we could only assume they were referring to Golden Freddy, because this character didn't exist yet. Think about it. What else would this be showing us? Golden Freddy has had a black hat in every appearance, but there's also yellow Bonnie there with him. So why would we never see this yellow Bonnie again? The relevance of it being the first stage, is it being Fredbear's Family Diner. It's the oldest restaurant that's ever been mentioned. The purple hat was added simply to make the character designs more unique. This, I think, is even played with that bonus version of the final boss I mentioned earlier. Simply called Nightmare, They have a shadowy black as the color of their fur, and a shiny gold for their bow tie and hat. They have the inverted colors of Golden Freddy. But ignore stage 1, what all I've shown so far. Entertain this idea for me. Entertain what happens if you make Golden Freddy the one to do the bite of 87. Well, firstly, it makes those 87s on the website make sense. But you know what? Let's go down the line. We already went over it. Remember how in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, you could activate Golden Freddy's jump scare by putting in 1987? Yeah, that would have a greater purpose if they were the one to do the bite. Not only that, but look at Golden Freddy's jump scares, even. It's always focused on the head, such a close visual of it. Sure, a lot of jump scares have the animatronics bite you, but you know which character has always had it be that way, every single time? Golden Freddy. And remember what Springlock suits are. They're dated things few and far between. Only 2 have been mentioned. We know one of them was Spring Bonnie. The reason why Golden Freddy has been portrayed as a limp costume is because of this. They're a Springlock suit, like Spring Bonnie. All this works so well, but the bite can't take place in 1987. FNaF 2 took place in 1987. Phone Guy mentioned Fredbear's as though it was a long time ago. There's also the fact that we know the main character dies from the bite when the kid who got bit in 87 survived. And again, there's more. The bite was important because it marked the point where the animatronics were no longer allowed to walk during the day. There are so many reasons for why this can't be the bite of 87. But that leaves us with those numbers on the website leading up to the game. What happened? Why were they there? Because things change. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was originally supposed to release on Halloween, but it didn't. People still don't really know what this 10 meant, hidden in the teaser for Phantom Balloon Boy, before FNaF 3 released. Things change. It's my argument that FNaF 4 was originally supposed to be about the bite of 87, but was changed as the game was being developed, because of the realizations made about why that can't be the case. Ask yourself why another bite would even be made as an important event in the story. Why make 2 bites, narratively, when the tragedy could just as easily be something else, even if it wouldn't work as well overarchingly? Because it wasn't originally intended to be this way. There was just supposed to be 1 bite. It was meant to tie everything together, the heavy hitters of FNaF discussion, into one final game for everybody to enjoy. It just had to be changed. But that's probably bringing other thoughts into your head about other things which need to be accounted for in me making this claim. We still have a long way to go with this video, but this is a key hopping off point. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is about a bite. The bite is the climax, what happens on the 5th night at Freddy's. So, it makes sense that the 6th night is different, but still about the bite. We get to see this, the aftermath of the bite. His older brother is apologizing. But there's something else going on. The voice of the Fredbear plushie is different. It's a lighter color. We know that the little kid sees the Freddy Fazbear characters as his friends. What scares him, what makes them nightmares, is the idea that his friends would hurt him. Fredbear reminds him of this, reminds him that they're his friends, because what we're seeing isn't literal. It's the kid passing to the other side. He's broken. It's him being reassured by his own impressions of the characters, his friends, as he dies. Something else happens, though. The kid's projection of Fredbear tells him that he's gonna put him back together. This is him possessing Fredbear. Fredbear is going to make this kid whole again by making them one and the same. He's going to become whole inside Fredbear. Yet, that is not how Five Nights at Freddy's 4 ends. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 ends on something far more mysterious. When you beat the game's bonus boss fight with Nightmare, you get this. Dubbed by fans as just the box, this remains one of the biggest mysteries in the entire series. We get shown it, and then get told, maybe some things are best left forgotten, for now. This message, by itself, conveys to us that this box was going to be brought up again at a later time. This is important to say, because we need to acknowledge that the responsibility of revealing what was inside was on the creator. It wasn't supposed to be easy to tell what was in the box, because what was inside it was going to be a reveal, a reward for us. That never happened, but there were some things said about it, what was inside. On a post made by the creator, a post which is now kind of impossible to access, but only kind of, he speaks a little about it. What's in the box? It's the pieces put together. But the bigger question is, would the community accept it that way? Today, the Five Nights at Freddy's fandom is so big and diverse that it's hard to get a group of people who are all on the same page about something. That isn't a slight against it though. It's something worth bringing up, because back when this post was new, Five Nights at Freddy's had only been around for a year. FNaF 3 was solved. As a community, people were on the same page with it. Trying to get everybody to feel the same way about it now is a monumental task, but this is my best. If you're willing to listen, to take in my ideas, I think most of us might just come around. But in order to tell you what my conclusion is, what it is that I think was going to be in the box, what the creator was uncertain we'd be happy with seeing inside, we need to talk about the biggest secrets there are in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. We need to pick it apart together. Keep in mind that Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is about a bite, so we can make conclusions about what was inside the box with that. It's relevant to that, because Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is a big, important moment of the continuity. Standing in front of this television on a specific day and pressing a button gives you this, Fredbear and Friends. Fredbear and Friends shows us how Fredbear was a part of the gang, and has been with Freddy Fazbear since the beginning. But it also shows that this game takes place in 1983, and that's crazy, because that's so far back. That's still the farthest back date ever mentioned by name in any Five Nights at Freddy's game. With this, the whole game takes on another layer of meaning. This was the first event in the timeline. And, I mean, doesn't that make sense? Focusing on Fredbear's here for this game? We got shown the oldest thing ever referred to in a FNaF game. Let me tell you about something else that connects. The puppet is a really important character to the series, but he didn't originate in the building that FNaF 2 takes place in. He came from Fredbear's. This much is evident by the fact his death is outside a location where there's only a bear character. But the reason why I bring him up is because he was relevant to FNaF 2's roster. It was important we got to know where the puppet came from when playing Five Nights at Freddy's 2. It wasn't relevant to that game to really go into what Fredbear was about. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, it was important to show where Spring Bonnie came from, and that's why we got this mini-game with him and Fredbear. So, with the focus on Five Nights at Freddy's 4 being on Fredbear, of course, we gotta focus on him. And, well, Fredbear is the earliest thing in the timeline. It's the very beginning of Five Nights at Freddy's. It's the origin of the nightmare. And so, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 does something bold, something amazing. It becomes celebratory. It ends Five Nights at Freddy's at the beginning. A good example of how Five Nights at Freddy's 4 cared about that, keeping the entire world and story together, celebrating the fact this story is told in the first place, is how the nightmare animatronics function. See, they actually intentionally work the same way as they do in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. Ever think about how it's weird that Five Nights at Freddy's 4 went back to there being doors to protect yourself from the animatronics? Well, guess what? It's a layered decision. Bonnie comes at you from the left hall and is one of your first antagonists, just like the first game. Chica comes from the right hall and occasionally goes into the kitchen, messing around with pots and pans so you can tell whenever you don't have to worry about her. Foxy runs around the halls, and you gotta prevent him from getting in. He's probably the loosest parallel, but I mean, the visual similarity of him hiding behind a curtain and him hiding in your closet is pretty undeniable. But then you also have Freddy being turned away by looking at him. Remember how Phone Guy said in the first game that Freddy becomes a lot more active in the dark? Yep, that's the idea behind that. And the reason why I emphasize the specialness of Golden Freddy's mechanics in each game is because Nightmare Fredbear is in a similar boat. He's got mechanics unique to him, but which are similar to the main four. He keeps that trend going from Golden Freddy. But, okay, all that's cool, but the ending of Five Nights at Freddy's, the ending, the thing which left people so satisfied and happy with the world, Happiest Day. How does that fit into this? Because, I mean, we just went over about how much Five Nights at Freddy's 4 cared about celebrating the series in its construction. Happiest Day is still the last thing. Chronologically, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 didn't change that. Well, immediately, something comes into focus. Happiest Day, it involves two characters, mainly. The kid who represents the puppet, and Golden Freddy, aka Fredbear. The last main event of the series is also about Fredbear. Everyone comes together to give him the birthday he never had. But how does Five Nights at Freddy's 4 acknowledge this? Five Nights at Freddy's 4 acknowledges Happiest Day in spades. It's all over the game. Not only that, but it acknowledges all the minigames in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. This is the big amazing thing at the heart of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 that not everybody realized. What I'm going to talk about right now are the missing pieces we need to put every single last thing together. Every minigame in Five Nights at Freddy's 3 has some sort of visual comparison to it made in the FNaF 4-day minigames. Let's go down the list. Balloon Boy's Air Adventure has the balloon kid outside laughing. Mangle's Quest has the destroyed pink fox toy in the sister's room. Chica's Party has the Chica toy missing her beak. Stage 01 looks just how like Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are presented on stage together. The shadows cast over this room in such a specific way, too. The shadows didn't have to be there. It's daytime. They're purple for this very reason. This is what I mean by saying Five Nights at Freddy's 4 ends the series where it began. Not only does it aim to tie everything together by showing where everything started, but it also creates parallels with the last events of the series, tying the entire story into a neat little bow. They're symmetrical. The two sets of minigames are symmetrical. Everything ties together. That was the point of Five Nights at Freddy's 4. It made these things so subtle as to try and not get people to think that there is some metaphysical reason as to why these things line up. They just do, because of symmetry, because of thematic reasons, because of making the entire series connect better. Make it so there are layers of importance to every single last detail. That's why it was intended to be the final chapter. But there's still some more things to go over. We're not done yet. I haven't told you what's in the box yet, or even what these hints were meant to tell us. So, let's dive into that now. These hints actually mostly go into the things we already talked about, but let me give you some bonus context for them as well. A lot of people have gotten confused by them, sometimes because of the fact that, out of context, they telegraph a lot less. We went over how these hints were given during a live stream. It's important to take that into account when assessing them, because they are responses to what people were talking about during that live stream. They were hints tailored specifically to that live stream. But with that in mind, here we go. The toy Chica being there, the toy of Chica, missing her beak, is a reference to the character of Toy Chica. It was said in response to people talking about how there aren't any illogical details in the series, questioning that. These hints were all revealed very close together, during that live stream. Mentioning this toy first was supposed to guide people into talking about why a reference to that character would be there, make you ask about what the significance of that would be overarchingly, thematically, it not being Toy Chica, but it being a toy of Chica. Symmetry. What is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child is actually pretty easy to explain. During the livestream, they went into the identity of the killer a lot, and if you didn't know, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 actually has the killer appear as a cameo before he's killed anyone. It's very specific how you run into him, having to walk back and forth on a certain screen, but he's there. The significance of this is actually surprising and layered, but how it is involves stuff you may be able to come to conclusions on your own with. It's weird that Nightmare Fredbear is so different from Nightmare Freddy, right? Well, there's a few reasons for why that is. Firstly, he's the origin of the nightmare. It makes sense that he'd be more big and monstrous if he is the one who actually killed the protagonist. Secondly, the big mouth on his stomach. Why? What's the point of that? This is why. The cameo appearance from the killer. What our main character saw that gets referred to is this. What gets seen in shadows is the stage being set. Someone getting fitted into a spring-lock suit. What he saw was someone getting stuffed into costume. The idea is, he saw it and thought the guy got eaten by the bear. 'Cause I mean, think about it. That's the whole idea with these animatronics. Kids think that these robots are alive. He thinks they're people. So seeing someone get fully swallowed by this guy, he gets afraid of being eaten too. Because that's just a common fear of something eating you. That's why Fredbear has this focused on his chest, of him eating you. Not only does this play in all of that, but it's a clever inversion of the core threat of the first two games. The threat of the first two games was that the animatronics were going to stuff you into a suit. All of that plays together into this being what Fredbear is about. He's a culmination of so much, a true final boss for the series. And so we wrap back around to that. The game is the final piece of the puzzle. These games, they all have one story. They're all meant to connect together so closely. That's what this last hint means. It wants you to think about how this game is meant to be the end. So, everything connects with this game. People wanted a Fredbear's game because seeing what happened at Fredbear's seemed so interesting. That's what this is, what this was. You have to put everything together in order to properly enjoy FNaF 4. You have to have all the pieces together from every game in order to get this satisfaction the game was trying to convey. It really wanted to complete everything. It ends with its beginning. Seeds planted grow. The first tragedy gets the last stage. Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Everything solved. That's all the game was trying to convey to us. So, imagine for me, what would have happened if everyone were on the same page with that? If that was what most fans thought was going on at the time? What would be in the box? It's the pieces put together. But would the community accept it that way? The reason why that's a question, why it's something unsure, is because everybody wasn't thinking this at the time. They didn't understand that Golden Freddy is Fredbear, and that's why this game is about what it is. We didn't understand that there were connections to Five Nights at Freddy's 3 that were important. Us. Me and you. We didn't have all the pieces. But we do now. I've laid out everything for you. All this in mind, I think I can make the best guess as to what was in the box. It was intended to be opened by the creator, as a reward for finding everything out. It wasn't supposed to be our responsibility. But I'm glad to take that responsibility. The pieces put together. What was inside, I'm going to tell you right now. The amount of locks wasn't important. The design, none of that. What was inside was this. A Fredbear mask. Because at that birthday party, you know who went without a mask? You know who never got to have the birthday that they deserved? You know who never got their happiest day? This kid. He's the first casualty in the entire series. He's the first one to suffer, and the one to suffer so unbelievably much. His brother tortured him. All he could rely on for friendship was his toys, and that makes him so hurt. That's why we control him in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Why we play as him while killing the killer. Why we have to comfort him at the end of everything. He's the beginning and the end. The pieces put back together. He is Five Nights at Freddy's 4, the final chapter. While the credits play, I want to give a few bonus notes just for the sake of it, and talk about some things that aren't really important to the main premise of the video. Firstly, I want to talk a bit about how FNaF World ties into this, because, well, there's something about it that I should just come out and say. FNaF World, one of its endings, basically just exists to better point people in the direction of the conclusion to this video. FNaF World's clock ending presents you with the mission to leave breadcrumbs for him, to help him find his way. This is said by Fredbear, the game's guide character. I could explain every message left by Fredbear for you, but I want to be concise. Fredbear has you find these clocks scattered across the map, which make you do these minigames, which reference FNaF 3. He's basically making it so you make the FNaF 3 minigames happen, and by extension, you make FNaF 3 and Happiest Day happen. This is what leaving breadcrumbs for him means. Fredbear is making us leave hints for the FNaF 4 kid, and by extension, us, in this roundabout way. So by the end of FNaF World's clock ending, the pieces are put together. The pieces being Happiest Day, and the FNaF 3 minigame's connection with FNaF 4. Secondly, the second book in the Five Nights at Freddy's novel trilogy, it actually also adds to what I've been saying here. Have you ever wondered what was up with this guy, the Twisted Wolf? Why he is a member of the gang once and never again? Because it's another example of symmetry. You see, if you're uninformed, in the Twisted ones, the animatronics there kill you by forcing you inside them, where you then get forcibly crushed by the spring locks inside. This again compares the action of getting stuffed into the suit with that of being eaten by a monster, and we know that this is the main thing the Twisted animatronics do to kill people. We see Twisted Wolf do this in his introduction, and one of the inciting incidents of the Twisted ones is police finding a body who's died to a spring lock failure. However, even though we know this is their main method of killing people, we only outright see this take place with two characters, Twisted Freddy and Twisted Wolf. Twisted Freddy has a mouth on his stomach in his main design, comparing him to Nightmare Fredbear. But the reason why that's there is because the animatronic itself opens up to trap them inside. It's important to note that because of what I'm going to say now. Even though Freddy gets that comparison, the Twisted Wolf, I think, is actually supposed to stand in for Golden Freddy / Fredbear here. He's a character who looks very similar to an existing member of the gang, and one of the things we see him do is open up his stomach as if it were a mouth to eat someone. Only Twisted Freddy and Twisted Wolf get to do this in the story. Okay, thirdly, a fair few people are probably watching this and screaming about Cassidy. Well, Let me say this. Cassidy didn't exist at this point. The fifth kid in Foxy Go Go Go, the original idea was just to retcon that Golden Freddy came about in this way, which gave a more in-depth reason for why Golden Freddy was special. They were Fredbear. That changed in future games, but I plan to go over that more in its own video, talking about Ultimate Custom Night, and explaining why not only Cassidy is special more in depth, but also going over how the protagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is important to Ultimate Custom Night, in a way I think nobody else on the internet has pieced together yet. And I do mean important. I think I found something that literally nobody else on the internet has documented well, or even considered a theory about. I'm holding something close to my chest there, trust me. I promise you that it's something big, and also something pretty irrefutable. That video is not going to be my next FNaF video, but it'll come relatively soon. The video is going to be called Five Nights at Freddy's 1 Retcon. If you know, you know. Lastly, I want to say what my next Five Nights at Freddy's video is going to be. It's going to be on Sister Location. I intend to dissect a bit of the narrative purpose to things there, as well as explaining what the deal is with things like Circus Baby's rentals and stuff. It's also going to go against some pretty popular fandom ideas, so hey, if that sounds interesting, stay tuned. Have a good night.